نستهدي ونستغفره ونتوب إليه وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. Welcome everybody for our 16th Resensi ILMI. Yeah. The 16th book that we are discussing today is the popular satire by George Orwell, Animal Farm. It was written during the period of chaotic wars, informational wars, Cold War between the superpowers at that time. And I think our presenter today, who's always, most of the time talks about education, but today she's going to speak more about politics and literature. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Mrs. Ida Suhana to present us about her evaluation of the book. Please.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asrofil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi washabbihi ajma'in. So apparently in the midst of all these wars between the Palestinians and the Palestine and the Israel, I think I just want to have a different topic to be revisited, and I think most of us in this room have already at least read the book once, but I will still give a short summary of the book and some characters, and later we'll also look into some of the themes, and after that I will pass it to our guest speaker, maybe to relate the book, what's going on with the current situation. So, yeah, Animal Farm has once worked so controversial that it seemed like unlikely to find a publisher. It has served for so long. It was written in 1945 by George Orwell. It is supposed to be a satire, anti-Stalinist, and we have seen the collapse of the regime that disturbed and inspired its author, and also the beginning and end of the Cold War, and of course the rise and fall of any number of would-be Napoleons, both at home and abroad. So Orwell in his book has narrated a particular experience of animals which has wider range of significance and profound relevance to human affairs. As a result, it has transcended space and time as it depicts a universal application in our contemporary world and beyond. So let me just share with you a bit of the summary. So it began one night at all the animals at Mr. Jones' Manor Farm assembled in a barn to hear old Major, a senior pig, describe a dream he had about a world where all the animals live free from the tyranny of their human masters. So here the masters that we're talking about is Mr. Jones. Old Major dies soon after the meeting, but the animals, inspired by his philosophy of animalism, plot a rebellion against Jones. Two pigs, Snowball and Napoleon, prove themselves important figures and planners of this dangerous enterprise. When Jones forgets to feed the animals, the revolution occurs and Jones and his men are chased off the farm. With that, Manor Farm is renamed Animal Farm, and the 7 commandments of animalism are painted on the barn wall. Initially, the rebellion is a success. Those animals complete the harvest and meet every Sunday to debate farm policy. The pigs, because of their intelligence, become the supervisors of the farm. However, in the face of these happenings, Napoleon proves to be a power-hungry leader who steals the cow's milk and number of apples to feed himself and the other pigs who supported him. He also enlists the service of Squealer, a pig with the ability to persuade the other animals that the pigs are always moral and correct in their decisions. So the politics of influence. Okay? Later, therefore, Jones and his men return to Animal Farm and attempt to retake it. However, they fail thanks to the tactics of snowball. And this is where the battle becomes the battle of courtship. Winter arrives and Molly, a vain horse concerned only with ribbons and sugar, is lured off the farm by another human. So the character of Molly is also kind of significant to what's also happening in the world right now, whether it is a noise or maybe something to disturb or something to distracted from us focusing on the most important thing. So Snowball begins drawing plans for a windmill, which will provide electricity. And this actually gives the animals more leisure time. But Napoleon vehemently opposes such a plan on the grounds that building the windmill will allow them less time for producing food. On the Sunday that the pigs offer the windmill to the animals for a boat, Napoleon summons a pack of ferocious dogs who chase Snowball off the farm forever. Napoleon announces that there will be no further debates. He also tells them that the windmill will be built after all, and lies it was his own idea stolen by Snowball. I think what's happened in the story resembles of the current situation more and more. For the rest of the novel, Napoleon uses Snowball as a scapegoat on whom he blames all the animals' hardships on. So next year, much of the time is spent on building the windmill. Boxer, an incredibly strong horse, proves himself to be the most valuable animal in this endeavor. And Jones, meanwhile, has forsake the farm and moved to the other part of the country. So now the animal farm is on their own. They have no threat from Jones anymore. So contrary to the principles of animalism, which is one of them not to rely on human being, Napoleon hires a solicitor and begins trading with neighboring farms. So two things here. First, he's hired a solicitor, and then he began to trade with neighboring farms, also with human beings. So that's against the principle of animalism. When the storm topples the half-finished windmill, Napoleon predictably blames Snowball and orders the animals to begin rebuilding it. So like in Malaysia, I think we have some parties that always been blamed for things that happen. So here in this story, it's always Snowball. So his lust for power, Napoleon's lust for power increases to the point where he becomes a totalitarian dictator, forcing confessions from innocent animals and having the dogs kill them in front of the entire farm. He and the pigs move into Jones' house and begin sleeping in beds, which Squealer give excuses with his brand of twisted logic. The animals, other than the pigs, receive lesser and less food, and we have the pigs grow fatter because they have the access of the food to themselves. So after the animal is completed in August, Napoleon sells a pile of timber to Jones, and Frederick, a neighboring farmer, will face it with forged banknotes. Frederick and his men attack the farm, damage the windmill, but they are still defeated. So as time goes by, more of the 7 commandments of animalism are broken by the pigs. And we see the language or the sentences or the phrase of the commandments being revised by the pigs. For example, after the pigs become drunk one night, the commandment, no animals shall drink alcohol, is changed to no animal shall drink alcohol to excess. Boxer again offered his strength to build a new windmill, but when he collapsed, exhausted, Napoleon actually sold him to a blue boiler, and Squealer, being the spokesperson of Napoleon, tells the animals that Boxer was actually taken to a veterinarian and died in a peaceful death in a hospital. When that, what happened is a contradiction to that. So just past Animal Farm expands, Napoleon purchases 2 more fields from Pilkington, and life for all the animals except the pigs is very harsh. So they had to struggle. So eventually, we see the pigs begin walking on their hind legs and take on many other qualities of their former human oppressors. To a certain extent, there was a description in the novel that the pigs are wearing the clothes of human. And the 7 commandments are now reduced to a single law. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. So the novel ends with Pilkington sharing drinks with the pigs in Joe's house. Napoleon changes the name of the farm back to Manor Farm and quarrels with Pilkington during a card game in which both of them try to play the ace of spades. As the rest of the animals watch the scene from outside the window, they cannot tell the difference from the pigs and the humans. So that's the end of the novel. So in general, the characters of the novel in the book can be assigned to the power regimes of the contemporary world, if you might agree. Napoleon is the leader who is full of lies and feeds on power. Squealer is the leader's mouthpiece, also known as the media and the press. Snowball can be compared to the charismatic and gifted orator who can attract masses, or the opposition leader that holds no power after he was exiled. Okay? Benjamin represents the sensible, hardworking, and education section of the society, which is aware of the government's wrongdoings but chooses to remain silent. Molly, the pony who is more interested with ribbons and sweets, represent all those bureaucrats and who favor and work for these leaders to fulfill their own agenda. So the rest of the animals in the farm are the masses who don't know anything but chant whatever or whichever the leader asks them to, without using their rational or questioning anything of the actions or the words of the leader. So in this example, one of the charts is 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. So that was at the beginning of the novel. But towards the end, we know what happened when, even Napoleon was trying to behave like humans. So there are a few things that I think worth to be discussed after this. Before we go into politics, I always, when I read this novel, I couldn't help myself to be lured by the issue of the lack of education. So we have intelligence and education as tools of oppression here in the novel. When we see following Major's death, the pigs are the ones that take on the task of organizing and mobilizing the other animals because they are generally recognized as being the cleverest of all the animals in the farm. So, yes, they have the education, but also at the same time, they use the knowledge to fit their own purpose, to fit their own desire of being in control. Yeah. So the pigs also limit the other animals' opportunities to gain intelligence and education early on. And even towards the end of the novel, we could see Napoleon plotting, planning to educate the next line of pigs, to be the oppressor, like what he has done before and like what he has become. Yeah. The pigs also use their literacy to learn traits from manuals, giving them an opportunity for economic specialization and advancement. Condemning the role of the intelligentsia, the pigs forego manual labor in favor of bookkeeping and organizing. This shows that the pigs have not only the advantage of opportunity, but also the opportunity to reject whatever opportunities they like. Their intelligence and education allow them to bring the other animals into submission through the use of propaganda and revisionism. So, and even at the end of the book, we witness Napoleon's preparations to educate a new generation of pigs and indoctrinate them into the code of oppression. Okay, so that is the first theme. The second one is violence and terror as means of control. Of course, it is it is described throughout the book. Yeah, the ways that dictators Napoleon used violence and terror to frighten the populace into submission. So in this case, Napoleon has the control of the packs of dogs, whom he used as his guards, as the executioner of his of all the punishment that are taken in the farm. Yeah. So once the pigs gain control of the animals, they discover how useful violence and terror can be, and they use this knowledge to their full advantage. And at one point, we could see the public punishment when some of the pigs were killed in public in front of the rest of the animal by the dogs. So besides this execution, Napoleon also coerces confessions from many of the animals that he executes. So that is one of his ways to control the animals. And execution with weapons is a violent and horrifying act, but many people have become desensitized to it. However, this act of forcing confessions from many of the animals is as damaging as it could be, with also with the act of executing the animals as a punishment in front of the public. And also another fear tactics that is used by Napoleon is when he is using snowball as a threat, as a reason, and as the reason of all the bad happenings occurred in the farm. So everything is blamed on snowball. Even to a certain extent, snowball is a threat that is worse than Jones, because we know that in the middle of the novel, Jones left, but snowball is being portrayed by Napoleon as something or someone that has always been around to give a threat to the other animals in the town. Okay, and then of course, the other theme is the exploitation and the need for human rights. So the theme of exploitation is very, very clear throughout the novel. And at the beginning, we have the speech of the old major, which is a revelation of momentous proportions. Old major actually explained to the animals that they are enslaved and exploited, and that man is to be blamed. He teaches them not only what exploitation means, but also the fact that it is not inevitable. So after the pass of old major, to a certain extent, the revolution took place, and it was all good until I think because they have no figure to remind them of what's going on. So Napoleon started to take control of the whole farm. So and Boxer is also another character, example of exploitation. Besides him being exploited by the other animals in the farm, he also allowed himself to be exploited. And because he believed so much in the greatness and goodness of Napoleon. So at the end, we could see that his ending is not good. And this is all because of the way Napoleon treats him. So throughout the novel, the author Orwell shows us the lack of human rights could result in total helplessness. But something lacking in the novel is that it doesn't suggest how to achieve human rights. Yeah? After all, once the animals expel Jones and gain rights for themselves, the pigs take those rights away, and the cycle of exploitation continues. with new player. So just to conclude, the whole point of the novella revolves around the central theme of humans' desire to establish a society that is based on justice, equality, and freedom, as the existing setup is exploitative, oppressive, and unequal. However, the human desire, gets the best of them. Corruption turns human beings into such a project that ultimately consolidates power for personal gains. Politics is often called dirty for the attributes of greed and power it resonates. And I can't help but to think to one simple conclusion. I quote it from somewhere: power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, as we have seen, we have discussed so many times, it is very important to share the power or distribute the power among the stakeholders, and the actions taken should always be collective, not a totalitarian decision made by one person. So I think that would be all. It's just a short one. But I would like to also invite my friend, my colleague here, to discuss also, to give his view on the animal farm and the happenings of the current world. Please welcome Mr. Scott Melvin.
Thank you. I didn't know I was going to talk, so I'll just kind of go off the cuff a little bit. But so do you want me to? Yes. So Animal Farm is a very interesting novel. It's probably one of my favorites of George Orwell, although some of the essays too should be read as well. 1984 has been, I think, it feels more scary and real in modern times. But it does have this, it has the same problem that you addressed in Animal Farm, where it just kind of tells you the worst case scenario, doesn't give you a solution or a way to get out of it. And I think that comes from George Orwell being a journalist. That's the problem. That is one of the problems with journalism, or what some might say is a strength of journalism, is that journalism always tries to retain that fly on the wall sentiment, where you don't really engage with what you're seeing. You just try to witness as best you can what you're seeing. But George Orwell also, I think, unintentionally goes beyond being that fly on the wall, which is a big problem we're seeing in media today, where there's a tendency, there's always going to be a bias, and there's always a tendency to report one way or lean one way or another. What's remarkable about Animal Farm is that's written in 1945. So at that time, technically World War II is still going on. And especially when he had written, because it had been written between, I think, 42, 43.
Yes, it was published in 45.
Yeah, so it took him a year because he had a lot of trouble publishing it, because everyone was like, what are you doing? The Soviet Union was Britain's ally at that time. They were, people always forget that. That's a famous question on the US citizenship examination. It says, who did the US fight in World War II? And people think we were fighting the Soviet Union, but we weren't. They were one of the allies. They forget that the original Axis powers were Germany, Japan, and Italy. And people forget about Italy, because Italy was practically done with the war by the time the United States entered, when there was that whole campaign through Italy. But what's really interesting is he had seen this is what's going to happen with communism as far as an ideology. That it just sort of it's a utopian idea that will naturally fall apart because humans are humans. And the best way that he felt to express that humans are humans is by showing it through animals. So it's very clever. But I also I take a page from, at the beginning of The Lord of the Rings, the first book, The Fellowship of the Rings, there's an introduction written by J.R.R. Tolkien. A lot of us skip those introductions, right? We just want to get to the first, let's get to the story, they lived a hobbit and all that. But as someone who now does write some of those introductory things, I'm like, please read the first few pages of every book, because there's some interesting insights that you can gain. And in the beginning of The Fellowship of the Rings, it's either I don't remember if it's a prologue or an introduction.
It's full of them.
Yeah, but there he writes, there's a difference between analogy and allegory. So Lord of the Rings is another book that is sort of, and this happened a lot in British literature at the time. It's people thought, oh, it's just an analog for the Nazis and the war in Europe, and the orcs are the Nazis, and the humans are the British and the French, and the Americans or whoever, the Eagles or the Americans. Everyone tries to. You've probably seen 1,000 YouTube videos where people try to draw the connections, but he tells you not to do that. Right in the introduction, he says, this was clearly written, as a reflection of my time, because he fought in World War I, the writer. But then as he's witnessing World War II, which is, so World War I was like the worst thing you could ever imagine, but then World War II, it's like, wow, it could actually get worse than what I thought was the worst thing that I could imagine. And so he said, don't use this as analogy, not as, allegory, not as analogy. So analogy would be to say, okay, the orcs are the Germans, the pigs in Animal Farm are the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Although, so what my hot take would be is that you don't have to use these as the direct analog of what they are, that they're more of a allegory. It's sort of a descriptive, it's a metaphor of. And so, although clearly what you're seeing in the pigs and Animal Farm is you see Lenin, and then you see Trotsky, and then you see Stalin, and you're seeing some of the early players. Although you could repeat that. So some people could say, well, maybe George Orwell is predicting the future because he sees what's going to happen when Stalin dies, and then later on, even when Gorbachev comes to power, you get sort of these interesting, sort of a repetition of the same story over and over again. But I think what's more important is to draw the allegory out of that, the more metaphorical notion of what's this book actually about. It's about abandoning your principles. Because they lay them out very clearly. It's like, don't do this, don't do that, everyone is equal. And then it just gets ridiculous as the more you stretch, the more you bend and try to. But it's an interesting story of pragmatism as well.
Yes.
And so it makes you wonder if any values can be carried out. If it's just human nature to break values, which I would hope it isn't, but maybe there's something to be learned from that. And then how in pragmatism we have to carry on and not be afraid of becoming the enemy. Maybe there are no enemies. It's hard to kind of get the full grasp. I think Orwell was just afraid of what political communism vis-a-vis the Soviet Union would become. And then that develops further in 1984. But 1984, he takes it to an extreme level, and he kind of loses faith in not just the communist ideals, but I think the democratic ideals too, because all of it, he just kind of becomes very, he doesn't have a lot of faith in any political system working properly. And so that's so I don't know, if you have any thoughts on abandoning principles and values, getting values survive, human nature.
I think we are open to discussion.
I just because I just realized that one of the main character is named Napoleon. So is it maybe it's very simple that he's basically also making fun of the French Revolution. The Jacob, the counter, what is it? What is the name of the Jacob?
Well,
the Jacobin. Is it Jacob?
The Jacobin,
No, the Jacobin, the one that terror, reign of terror. What is it? What is it?
Oh, you mean Robespierre?
Robespierre,
yeah. And
they said that they wanted to
It's
brought down the king to bring peace, but now they become worse.
Yeah, it sort of plays out that way, right? It's the you have this ideal that, and this is always I think it's a criticism of revolution too.
Yeah.
And so revolution in and of itself has lots of problems, but it's something we always kind of strive for. So I think that's kind of interesting. So is there a correct way to do that?
I don't know.
We can say Iranian revolution also. They wanted to bring Islamic society back, but we know a lot of Muslims do not agree the version, Iranian revolution version.
Yeah.
But I think one also very prominent theme in the novel is the lack of the role of women in the whole thing. We only have Verity, the female horse, and that's it. And that actually, whether we want that to allow to continue happening, because to a certain extent we could see also the number of women in parliament in Malaysia, I'm not talking about other country, in Malaysia, and whether the voice of women, whether the plights of women are really represented by these people in the parliament, and whether these women MPs are doing their role to address, number one, to address, and to also find solution of the current issues. Now, because it was very obvious throughout the whole story. We have the lack of education of the animals. That is very one major issue that I think whether we like it or not, we have to address. I'm not going to politics because everybody talks about animal farming politics, but beyond that, the role of women, the importance of education to the masses, not only to the designated people of the society, but to the masses. And how are we? I think that is the most basic. I would see that as the most basic issues depicted in the novel. Yes, based on the history, when Orwell did write the novel, the background, and like you said just now, the allegory of it. Because when I teach in class, I would go always into the issues that are, to me, the most important and the most basic, something that all of us would be able to contribute and to do something about. So to me, politics aside, history aside, we take the novel because we have different point of view, right? When we read something, we take the novel on its own. To the core is the theme of education, the lack of education of the masses, and also the lack of the role of women in the society. So that's how I could see it. So because I teach literature to a bunch of TESOL students, so I don't want them to go so much into politics, but I want them to look into the text and really identify what is the major issue that is very much relevant to what's happening now. We still have issues with education for the masses, even in Malaysia, right? Now with the new administration, we hope this issue would be tackled, and there are some ways to ensure that all children goes to school, even all daughters manage to get their place in the school. So I think these are very important. Not to say because I'm a woman, but at least I think in this very much modern, or we could say post-normal world these days, the men and women should play the same role in bringing the society together, and also in bringing their own family together, because a society starts with the smallest part, which is a family, an individual that becomes family. So you want to take care of the society, you take care of the family first, and from there, it goes together, and we will be a great country if we take care of the basics first. So that is my opinion. That's not something that I wrote, so it comes naturally, but I would like to go into that, the lack of education for the masses and the lack of the role of women, which would make a lot of difference if there is any, but because we could say that women is not important, they're not educated, their voice is not represented, so the whole novel is controlled or is by the voice of the male.
But it's written by male.
Yeah. Well, and each of the characters too is something, I don't remember, 'cause I haven't done the deep dive in a while on this, but is it the crow is the church, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then, but of course it's the Russian Orthodox Church. So
Yes.
that's,
Yeah, we can have also to think that Napoleon actually representing someone in Malaysia. Snowball is also representing, although the snowball that we are referring to is not in exile anymore, right?
yeah.
Yeah, and the pigs also represent some group of people in Malaysia. So although I hope that group of people now has changed a bit with what has been going on. So, but to me, it's always, we go back to the basic, it's always the lack of education of the people or of the other animals in the novel that gets everyone into trouble, because of this also blind imitation of the leaders. That would be all from me.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Interesting observation. To try to not only grasp the apparent, you will always draw the analogy between the novel and the reality, especially in terms of politics. Ilham, do you have something to comment?
Maybe just want to share that reading this novel, I'm reminded of the other book written by Brazilian educator and thinker, I think, Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, because he addressed the problem of why revolution doesn't work, or in other words, why revolution end up with another form of oppression, because like the presenter said, right, because of education. But the kind of education that he emphasized, I would say, in the form of discourse or dialogue, which involves everyone, every party, the oppressed, the non-oppressed, and eventually even the oppressor should be included in that dialogical process. And this dialogue needs to be carried out before the revolution happened, during the revolution, and even after the revolution itself should be subjected into that discourse. The problematization should happen at every point of time, because it is to keep that human evil tendency in check. So that's what.
Use a very nice phrase, human evil tendency. It's a contradiction in itself. Human evil.
The Quran says we have two paths.
Yes.
It's not purely good and it's not purely evil.
Yeah.
It's up to your free will to choose. And so long that we still have that natural predispositions where we are, we have that proclivity to be evil and oppressed. Okay, Fadrul.
I don't have any comments.
Have you read the book?
No, I'm not yet. Even not watching the movie.
I don't
And also, I'm not.
There's an animated film from
Oh, you mean
years ago.
I didn't know. I didn't know.
Yeah, movie.
In the 80s. But
In English, yes.
I think they made, and I'm sure Netflix is bringing out that live action.
And also they have the live action actually in 1990s.
Oh, in the 90s, okay.
Yes. They use the real animal.
I did not read the 7 commandments, but I'm going to read them. Right? One, whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. 2 legs enemy. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. Okay. 2 enemy, 4 friends. No animal shall wear clothes. No animal shall sleep in a bed. No animal shall drink alcohol. No animal shall kill any other animal.
But at the end of the day, the pigs,
Napoleon was wearing human clothes, walking on their hind legs, also sleeping in a bed, and drinking alcohol, and involving in cards games. So they did everything
opposite of what the command
They broke the law.
Yeah, they're doing everything that human does. So we don't see the difference. So maybe, to a certain
I
extent.
think that's also the question of the conqueror, the conquered following the conqueror.
Yeah.
I think this also the idea is also in Ibn Khaldun, Ibn Khaldun said that usually people who have been conquered, they follow their conqueror, their way of life, their own their clothes, the way of thinking, colonialism, and right now we still have in the era of post colonial, not just post normal, but post colonial. We know for a fact in Malaysia, in a lot of other Muslim countries, they still follow the British, the Dutch, the French, how they think. They see the Paris and London and watch New York as their cultural capital and also intellectual capital of their country. I think this is some in Malaysia, for example, when we are in independent, at least some groups did not have the we can say intellectual capacity to build the nation. They don't even want merdeka. They don't want independence. They said that they are okay with British. British don't go into the religion. Don't go into the Malay culture. They let us be. Even if they have their own inferiority, said that we cannot rule this nation without British. Some like people like Burhanuddin Alimi, from PKM and even Communist Party, they said that we need, if we want to build a nation, we need to build from the ground, from the start. Maybe in Malaysia we never have that kind of stage because we never, the so-called the revolutionary never win. The people that is more accommodating to the Western is eventually winning. So that's why we never see it like that. But places like, I think, even places like Arab country, Iran, places like that even Turkey, they basically, they've been conquered by the West, and then Ataturk said, we need to be like the West to become more modern. To catch up with the West, we need to be like the West. I think that's my comment.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, some sociological perspective.
Sociology.
I don't know about sociology, but I do know, being reminded by Friar again, when the oppressor, when the oppressed became liberated and come to position of power, and then turning themselves to be like their previous oppressor, that's because of what Friar called as the psychology of the oppression. I think we need to understand that oppression is a material condition, and it has very real and deep impact into people's psychology. So when oppression happens, it doesn't only revolves around the mind of the oppressor, but it also changes the internal aspect of people being oppressed. So much so that people internalize that oppression into themselves. They become their own mini oppressor. So when they come into position of power, they are more likely to replicate or to manifest that inner aspect. And this is why Ferrer keep emphasizing on the importance of education, because the material aspects, the internal aspect of human being needs as much reformation as the material aspect. So, voila.
But there has been also a saying, going to politics. I just want to say this for the sake of saying. There has been a saying that no matter how brilliant, how smart you are before you become a politician, the moment you become a politician, you become as dumb as the rest of the other politicians.
Ida 2020.
Yeah, 2020.
You, right?
No, that's what I mean. We have been, me and my friends from that represent some other parties also, because of course it doesn't really apply to the current administration, but I think it could be applied to some figures that no matter how brilliant you are, example I cannot mention, no matter how brilliant you are before politician or member of parliament, the moment you become that member of parliament, you are as dumb as the previous members of parliament.
You can mention example by analogy.
Never mind. It is recorded.
You don't even have to go to politics, right? I always say, because I think it's Aristotle who may have said that, although maybe someone before him said it. When power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That one. You see it just in, like, imagine driving a car, right? We act as different people when we drive a car because that car represents power. It's power of mobility, and it changes us. That's all you have to do is look at who you are when you're driving versus who you are in, like, coffee house, or tea house. It's the same, I would argue most people are different. And if you're not, then either you're fooling yourself or
Power mobility.
well, I mean, it's also the power of modernity if you really want to get metaphorical about it, but or the power of what's the intoxication style, wealth. If you're driving a fancy car, I guess. I don't think it takes a fancy car though. You can hop in the oldest proton around, and I think it's still we act differently.
I took a train when I was coming here, so I was not driving. Do you want to say?
Yeah,
You
I
have to
mean,
say something.
we are open to discussion. It's the Baltis, no? Not much I can add, just to say that in the Islamic tradition, to produce novels and was it analogy and? Allegory. Allegory is not alien to the tradition. You have, for example, the most popular one is by Ibn Tufayl, Philosophicus Autodidactus, I think was translated to Latin, which inspires Robinson Crusoe, and some depiction in Tarzan, Mowgli. And also you have philosophical work by Surawardi, a Persian 12th century philosopher who wrote Qissatul Ghurbatul Gharbi. And now the reason why they wrote these treatises or allegories probably different. George Orwell probably wants to educate the masses about what's happening. Probably those who don't follow politics or understand the international relations affairs, by reading these novels, they can point out some parallel with what's happening in the novel and what's happening in reality. And so they can kind of catch the playing and the manipulations happening. Suravardi is trying to propagate his philosophy. Because he has his own system, and therefore producing this novel can give allegory to that philosophy. So you have different reasons why people wrote novels. J.R. Tolkien has some other objectives he wants to achieve, and some are simply expressing their literature capabilities and also aesthetics. So that's meta discussion to animal farm.
But this one is not really what the old days like Orwell.
George Orwell.
And this book is not specific on politics. I mean, is it? Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Necessarily.
How about because I asked Ada because she is also the lecturer who will teach literature, English literature, about the use of animals in stories, because it also happened in Malay world, I think. In Al-Quran, in Al-Quran you also use Al-Baqarah, An-Nahl, An-Naml.
Yes.
Although they don't, it's not stories There will be stories, alfils or alfils. So what do you think? In the world culture, using animal as stories.
This is just my point of view. You might not agree with me, but I think as Muslims read the novel, the first question would be why pigs? Why pigs? You know, you mentioned just now the halality of pigs. So now we are talking about all the haramity of pigs. And the leader is a pig. The one who is doing all the wrong things also is a pig. So it's a piggy world in Animal Farm. So it's a piggy world in Animal Farm. So therefore, of course, when Orwell, I think we could say it is safe to say that it has nothing to do with the views of the Muslims. That Orwell uses pig as the major characters of the book.
I mean, a pig is still an insult in England.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I think that the whole notion of being greedy and some of the same attributes are still there. Pigs are greedy.
But even the
pigs
nature
are
of pig itself
gross.
is gross, is greedy, they eat everything.
Roll around in mud. They're interesting metaphors of excess, which I think is one of the things that Orwell wanted to underline. I mean, really at the heart of why he wrote the story is I think he was just scared to death of the Soviet Union. I think he thought that was like and maybe a lot of his friends that he was meeting with in the pubs were like, oh, this communism thing sounds kind of cool. And so he was like, no, I mean, look what happens in practice. And so he's sort of having a dialogue to a certain extent. But then, I think the use of pigs were used very deliberately just to be that sort of symbol of excess, that they're gross, they're nasty, greedy, that sort of. But to set it on a farm is very interesting. I mean, maybe that's to appeal to more common. If you think of your common Englishman, he probably lives on a farm or something like that.
Yes.
How about is Orwell also wanted to write this book for adult or for children?
This is definitely for adults.
Definitely for adult. And it's funny because the original title I think was called Animal Farm: A Fairy Tale. But like just to like in a joking, because I mean then of course a satire. I think in most editions you find today it'll say a satire, and so he was very particular, as many British writers are, about their use of those sort of terms, and so he was like, no, this is a political satire. That is that's the aim of this book.
I think it is safe to say that when Orwell was writing the book, his only focus, like you say, it was his fear of Stalin and all. But somehow, some way, as time moves on, the book actually resonates a lot of other things, and this book becomes still relevant even after almost 75 years of its writing. So in as much as we might want not to agree, we could say that Orwell is a futurist to be able to do that. He has a very one-track mind, but the outcome is something that is, something that is revolutionary, that, it is still relevant almost 100 years after its writing, right? So, Shazwan, so I hope that answers the question.
Ascribing characters to animals. I mean, people argue they're just being who they are.
I read an article when I was doing my undergrad. This article was given to me by my lecturer. The sum up of the article is, we keep on using animals when we want to say something hurtful, something gross. What if animals start using human, in replace of using humans, the way we use them to express something that is not good? You human, or you Ada, among them. So it's like
But even now we use the name. Let's say you are bad like Hitler, or you are in Muslim, you are bad like Fir'aun. So we are not using the word human, but we're using them. Some name
Mhm.
is being allegorical.
No, it's Zionist Israel.
Yeah. You are Netanyahu. So you are being, the name is being used to refer to
Yeah.
as a Islam.
But it's a rule, right? There's the rule, some number, and it's every debate eventually devolves into.
Yeah,
calling
don't
each
call
other
it.
Nazis.
Name calling, yeah. Name calling. Everybody is Nazi, everybody is
Yeah,
Nazi.
yeah. Oh, no, that's the power of metaphor, I suppose. It's funny though, that's frowned upon these days. They call it's called anthropomorphization, which is where you ascribe human characteristics onto animals. And now it's frowned upon. Like if I turned in a draft and it mentioned, then they say I'm using flowery language and like get rid of that. No one wants to read about that these days. I think there's a power in some of the metaphors, but it's interesting because when you talk about old sayings, for instance, we ascribe certain qualities to certain animals, and so that's referring to its nature. But I think its nature can sort of change because, like, what in some cultures bats are good luck, in some cultures bats are like evil and dark creatures and bloodsuckers and all these other things.
In Malay, if butterfly come to your house, it means good luck, right?
Yeah.
Good luck, or someone is wanted to marry you, right? Bravo.
Oh,
That's the one
Yeah.
that you
I have a lot of butterflies.
Or another one is if you see a cardinal, it's a former loved one who passed away coming to visit you. Like that, you hear some of these.
Yes.
So, I think it's a very human thing to do, but it's interesting how different cultures will do it slightly differently. So,
But I don't know, only today I know that even the English look at pig as something that is that doesn't really signify or symbolize something that is good.
But do you find the same in the Quran? I mean, it mentions a lot of animals, but as far as my memory, I hardly remember that the Quran alludes to animal with some characteristics. Either
We have
positive-
An-Namalu,
I remember in Quran that the ulama, the scholars, they use a dog as the allegory to the bad scholar.
Yeah, but not in the Quran. Ghazali mentioned that, yes, but not in the Quran.
The word of God itself never refer to any animal as something.
Yeah.
I don't think they use the animal as animal. That's a character.
Yang disebut dalam Al-Quran anjing,
Oh.
yang ulama yang jahat ni, ulama maksud tu seperti anjing yang
Hadis
dijadi
tu,
lidah.
itu hadis tu.
Hadis.
Hadis ni. Bukan Quran, hadis.
Yang kalau dihalau dia tetap
Ya.
ni.
You must find.
For example, the analogy of weaknesses is put beside the reality of how fragile the web of a spider is.
Yes.
That doesn't refer to say the spider as a sneaky animal.
Because maybe just human thing.
Is it Quran?
Yang jawab saja ni.
Oh yes, it's a Quran.
So there is some need to.
Yes. Satu judul Al-Baqarah. Al-A'raf.
This anthropomorphization.
Anthropomorphization.
In the Quran. That's next article, Shazwan.
Yeah.
For critical Muslim.
That could be interesting. Because I mean, there would be a fear of doing that, right? Because that's what a lot of the pagan beliefs would do. The animalism and animalistic notions.
We do, but there is the Jewish people, Bani Israel, being turned to monkey because if they go to the sea when in Sabbath. It is required. So that's maybe how God is condemning women as turning them to animal, to the monkey.
But it's
And monkey is, I don't know why God turned it to monkey. Maybe there is ulama discuss it, but it must be
Something is a
something.
metaphor of a
Ah.
monkeyness.
Some say it's not really monkey,
Yeah, yeah.
They turn like monkey.
Oh, it's metaphorical language as opposed to
Yeah,
actual.
instead of
Yeah.
monkey. Yeah, there is some
That's the other issue you get
Ah.
into. is
Even
metaphorical.
in this ayat, that person that kind of act is compared to it's also a metaphor.
Yeah, metaphor.
Because his example is that of a dog.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So it's a metaphor. That is the definition.
His
The
example,
translation.
example.
His example is that of a dog. If you chase it away, it pants, and if you leave it, it still pants. This is the example of the people who deny our science.
Yes.
So narrate to them stories of the past, so perhaps they will reflect. So I think mostly it is metaphorical.
So-
The discussion.
So there is, to some degree, that anthropomorphic.
It's a new word. We have to use it again and again to be able to know.
Anthropomorphic.
I think we
Yes.
Oh, okay. So yeah, any last comment?
Yeah.
Ilham? Okay, start.
No.
Okay, you want to conclude? Yeah.
I think that, there's some cool things. I think we talked about some cool things referring to metaphors and literary devices and how they're being used and what they're really saying, difference between analogy and allegory and metaphor, and the use of anthropomorphization of animals to tell more about humans. So I think that there's a lot of interesting further work I think that can be done in a lot of different books on this notion as well. So yeah, thanks Ada for great talk.
Thank you, Ada and Scott, for the presentation comments. Also, thank everyone for coming here physically and those following online. Tune in for our next discussion, probably next week. I think we're going to talk about Palestine. It's a long issue, and see you. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.